and we know we're going to have a great 9 o'clock hour this half hour, and we're excited about our guest. We've been doing some talking to him even before we come on, and he's originally from our area around Sumter, South Carolina. Well, from Sumter, South Carolina, and we're in Greenville. That's not far, so we got a little bit in common even before we go on, huh?
Yes, yes. So we kind of got to know him a little bit, but what we're going to be talking about this evening is his new movie. He is the star of and also the director of Father's Legacy. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about this movie. It's an inspirational story of family, loyalty, and redemption. After years of searching for his father, a young man on the run from the law finds his way into the life of a secluded old man in the woods. As the days go by and secrets about their past are revealed, they realize they may not have been looking for each other, but they were brought together for a reason.
Wow. And I got a little bit of his bio to read here. A Father's Legacy is Jason Mack's feature film directorial debut. He began storytelling as an actor in Atlanta on shows such as Vampire Diaries, Castle, and Criminal Minds, among others. After moving to Los Angeles, he noticed actors were a single piece of the greater puzzle. Jason began looking for and creating projects to be more involved in the entire process, calling this his film school.
Well, that's the way to do it. You're just putting yourself right in the middle and you learn. A Father's Legacy was born out of one of the most difficult times in Jason's life. His father passed away unexpectedly, and he was one of Jason's protectors. He was a guardian and someone who always lifted him up. The movie is a fictional story, but it does reflect the father-son relationship, and this is Jason's love letter to his father. So we're excited to talk to him about it, so please welcome Jason Mack with us today. Thanks so much for taking the time across the country for schedules to align and be with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, tell us a little bit about your story. You've always wanted to be a storyteller. You were explaining that to us a little bit before we started filming here, and how this all came about.
You know, I was at the time, and I mentioned this to you before, but after I graduated from school with a degree in finance, I was the sales director for microbrewery RJ Rockers, which some of your folks may know. And I was traveling up and down the East Coast selling beer, and it was great. I worked with some people that I really loved. My bosses were amazing and taught me a lot about being a leader and a manager. And but I had to ask myself, hey, do I want to do this for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years? And I started thinking, like, what really just kind of lights my soul on fire? And I thought back to when I would go to the movies or certain TV shows that would make me feel certain emotions, or would just make me laugh or provoke me to thought, and introduce world issues that I never even thought about in my bubble and, you know, wherever I was growing up. And I was like, I want to be a part of those stories. I want to be a part of someone who wants to escape their day for half an hour or an hour and a half, whether it's through laughing or feeling or tears or whatever it may be. And that's when I started my pursuit to be an actor. And that took me back home actually for a couple years. And I remember during that time, I had a sleeping bag in the back of my car that probably got more use in that year. I called it my free internships, where I went and did every short film, like independent film, whatever I could do, no matter how bad it was, which there was a lot of bad stuff. But I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I would go and hope that people would let me sleep on their floor or their couch. And I did that for a year. And then I went to Atlanta, where I got my first gig, the Vampire Diaries. And after 2 years, I came out to Los Angeles. And I've been here for a while now, and started writing more and directing more. And that's how kind of my story has evolved into telling stories, is first by being impacted by them.
Yeah, well, we were talking a little bit before we went on the air about you being from Sumter, and how in the world a kid from South Carolina could end up in LA. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I always thought that if you were going to be an actor, it was LA or New York. Like that's very simplistic, but I mean it is kind of true. But I was like, well, New York was more. I looked at like Broadway and theater, which it is, um, but like strangely enough, I haven't resonated with theater the same that I do like film and TV. And that's probably just because I was more impacted by films growing up. And it's a more kind of subtle medium. So I was like, all right, I got to go to Los Angeles because that's where all the decisions are made. Which is true, but even now, like there's tons of projects being shot in Atlanta, which I was there for 2 years, and it's a great place to get some experience. But still, the biggest stuff is still coming out of LA.
Yeah.
Well, we always thought we were something when we would go into LA, huh? Wow.
I used to go to, you know how you could get the tickets and go sit at the sitcom and watch the,
Yeah,
My Two Dads or Who's the Boss.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, we
it'd
loved
be
it.
like my dad would take me for the day to go sit in all the sitcoms.
What's funny about that is like when I came here, I was like, I'm not buying a ticket or I'm not going to get a free ticket to a sitcom. It was probably like more just like young ego. But then I started meeting people who were like the people in the sitcom. And they were like, hey, like, do you want to come see a show? And I'm like, oh, yeah, as a guest? Absolutely. But and I'm sitting in the same seat, but it was so amazing. Like, it's really neat to be at a taping and to kind of see more or less like how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
And I just love seeing that behind the scenes aspect. And that's why I love also being a director is I like the process of it.
Wow, that's great. Well, what was the catalyst that brought about the story of the father's legacy?
Honestly, it comes from kind of two paths merging into one. And the biggest being my father passed away unexpectedly.
Wow.
And it was through complications with some surgeries he was having, but it was like not expected. And I remember, I mean, that was really tough because I didn't really quite know how to deal with it or really know like what really grieving is. And at the same time in my professional career, I knew that I wanted to make a feature film. And I had already done some shorts, but I was like, I don't know what am I going to make as a feature film? And so these kind of moments collided, and I started writing this script that was based on a lot of my reflections on what a father is and on what a son is. And that became the screenplay for A Father's Legacy. And ultimately it was like, I refused to be denied. And so I was like, I don't care if we have $10 million, $100 million, or like $10. This movie is going to get made. And we actually ended up shooting it on my family's property. So that pond house that you see, that's our family's property.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
I wrote it around that because I was like, I'm not going to have anybody say no. And my mom can't say no.
Right.
So we just invaded and we shot there as our primary location. Yeah.
That is so cool. Now, the other star in the movie along with you was Tobin Bell. Now, how did you get him in a film like this? Because this is completely different than other films, and I want them to put a picture of him on the screen. You may find him familiar from other films he's been in, but how did this come about to have him in the film with you?
It's actually, I think, like it's like a not normal, but a normal Hollywood story. So we hired a casting director, which was one of the smartest things I did, because originally I was just going to cast the film myself, use friends from my time in Atlanta that I knew were just phenomenal performers. But I was like, this old man is like, he's kind of the rock of the movie. And so this casting director, Matthew Seafick, I was like, well, let's shoot our shot. So we went out to agents and managers in Los Angeles, kind of with like, hey, here's kind of the parameters of our film, budget-wise, here's the story. And we got a list back, a long list, which actually there's some really interesting names on there of people who might be interested. And he was on there. And I remember being so intrigued by that because obviously I know him from horror films. And I was like, okay. So I went back and watched some of his other stuff. And I was like, his voice has such a weight to it. And also you look at him, and this is a man who has lived a life. You can see the creases on his face. You see the wrinkles, and it just like he carries his experiences on his face. And I wanted that. I didn't want like a spring chicken coming in there being like, looking all fresh, like they're 50. I wanted somebody who looked old. And so I was fortunate enough that he responded to the script. And there were some personal things in his life that kind of coincided with that moment. And it was a very different role for him. And we sat down at a cafe on like right across from the beach in Santa Monica. It sounds like such a Hollywood story, but we literally just sat there for 2 to 3 hours and just talked. And really it was a matter of not me deciding if he was going to be right for us, but is he going to trust me to come to South Carolina for not very much money and make this movie?
Well, I love the character because, you can come in with that gun pointed at him and he's like, what are you doing? Like the gun doesn't scare him, next thing you know, he's got your gun in his hand. But that character is kind of perfect because you're right. There's so much life that he's lived in his face. It kind of makes me think of like, who else could have done that? Maybe Clint Eastwood? I don't know. Like, just that kind of look and feel of, dude, you're really going to point a gun at me. Like, so anyway, I think it's a perfect pair up. And I love that you guys shot this at your home in South Carolina, here in South Carolina. And so that's really cool.
We could have been in the movie, maybe.
I know, we could have been extras.
I know. I didn't know.
Well, what we want to do is we want to share with our viewers the trailer for A Father's Legacy. This gives you a little bit of an idea about the movie, so check this out.
My dad used to tell me that the ripples on the water were a representation of our life.
It's important to pursue a relationship with your Heavenly Father.
Every time that stone hits the water, it affects the area around it.
Is that the people in our lives?
Can be.
See, I had an earthly father who was never around.
Do you want to talk about your father?
Nothing to talk about.
And at the center of each circle is a choice we make. Why'd you steal that money? How's this all turning out for you?
Trying to make the best of the situation.
In the situation you created, coming into my house and pointing a gun at me.
You better watch it, old man. Be careful where you're walking. Okay, I'm in charge.
So this is your idea of being in charge, huh?
A call from the neighbor said they might have seen someone in the woods in connection with a warehouse robbery in town. Guard tagged him on the way out, so he might be looking for a place to shack up.
How long you lived out here?
Long time.
You ever get scared of being alone?
I ain't scared of much. Being alone ain't one of them.
Well, we want to know who your new friend is. What's your name? All right,
Time to go.
We're not looking for no trouble.
You stay here and you'll find it.
You gotta think about your decision, the effect it has on others, and on yourself.
Listen, my son, my son.
Gonna come a day when you have to answer for your past. And I would recommend that you not wait till you're an old guy like me. What?
You're so old.
I need a beer.
Well, I know that probably piques your interest. It's a great movie, a great story, and just knowing that it was filmed here in South Carolina is another reason that you should watch it. So we want to encourage you to check that out. It's called A Father's Legacy, and we've got Jason Mack with us, the star of the movie and the director and writer. So he's been sharing a little bit with us. So if you're just joining us, you're going to have to after this live feed goes, you're going to have to rewind it and listen to more about how he became an actor out in LA.
Yeah, tell us about the filming and how you chose the location. We're excited to hear this now.
Yeah, the location was, I wrote it around our family's pond house. And because, for a couple of reasons. One, logistically, I knew I had access to it. And two, with this movie, I knew that we weren't going to have a big budget. And so a lot of our hometown, a lot of my hometown in Sumter was so supportive. And so we had crews staying in people's houses. We had some wonderful local restaurants and hotels like supporting us. And so we really like donating cars so that we could use it while we're filming and bring in home cooked meals. We ate so well.
That gave him another reason that he was glad that he came, right?
Yeah, right. Oh, he loved the food was so good. And so that was one logistically, but then two, this story was so personal to me that I was like, I want it to be in a place where it's just reeks of authenticity. And so it's like this was the same land that my father spent like a lot of time on. And I knew that this was a place where my father had loved and where there had been family. And I truly believed that that was going to come across into the camera as we were filming this movie. And I believe that to this day, like that I can see it and feel it, like it's just real. We didn't have to create that, like it was just there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now there's so many elements to this movie. You've got relationship, responsibility, faith, and it's not your typical inspirational movie. Was that intentional?
Yeah, I wanted to make a movie that was a little bit more reflective of my experience in real life. And this isn't a biography of mine, but, I wanted to show that both of these characters are broken and they've made mistakes. Some of them were self-inflicted. Some of them were just the hand they were dealt. And I wanted to show that even though they maybe feel discounted or maybe they feel like they didn't have anything to offer, they can change someone's life. And I think that's important because I think a lot of times in faith films, which is totally cool, but it's usually like, oh, there's a pastor or something that's the main figure. And it's like, well, a lot of times in life, it doesn't work that way, right? It's just anyone can make a difference in someone's life and they can be there for someone. They don't have to be necessarily a pastor or they don't have to have this, quote unquote, perfect life. Like, because we're all flawed, we've all made mistakes. And I really wanted to convey that and just have it be grounded in reality.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think, hope that the viewers will take away from this movie?
Two things. One is you are worthy and you do have something to offer and to not discount yourself. But the second is I hope that when anyone gets done watching it, they someone in their life that they love, they call them and they let them know, whether that's a parent or maybe a coach along the way that impacted them or a business mentor or a small group leader, like someone that's invested in them. I hope that they kind of pop into their head and they shoot them a text or give them a call and tell them they're thankful and they love them.
I think that's so good of like just talking about not being maybe your typical inspirational faith-based movie, because you're right, thinking back, there are so many great movies, but there's always like you said, there's that church or that pastor or something like that, but just allowing, real life and the everyday people in it that the Lord uses, and that we can be one of those people as well, that using your surroundings as your mission field, whatever that may look like. So I love that that's kind of how the movie kind of portrayed that as well. Now, tell our viewers how that they can watch A Father's Legacy, how they can get a hold of this.
Yeah, so pretty much anywhere that you can buy or rent a movie online, you can do that right now. So the most popular ones are going to be, iTunes or Apple TV, Amazon, Google Play, Vudu, all that stuff. And also, I believe it's out in Walmart on actual DVDs. And you can actually order DVDs on Amazon, too. I ordered myself one.
Oh, look at that.
I want to be one of the first to get my own movie in the mail.
That's cool. So if you guys have not seen this, you've got to check it out. Like you heard, there's many ways to be able to access this. This would be a great opportunity to sit down with your family and watch a movie that has some meaning behind it. But I did want to ask you some more questions, like just on the filming part of it. Like, what are some of the most memorable moments that you had during the filming? Like, was there a moment that like this was just funny, or this was something that really spoke to me, or conversations or people?
Probably two of the biggest things that stick out to me. One was with Tobin, we're outside. The gnats were atrocious. So we're trying to do these scenes with each other, and and I see Tobin, and there's like gnats crawling around on his eyeballs, and they're crawling around on mine, and you're acting, so it's not like you can just start swatting things. That doesn't look cool on camera. So you just kind of have to like deal with it. And it was pretty intense there for a few days, and our makeup artist was like figuring out, okay, how do we get like gnat spray and to get these things away from us? But then the second thing that really sticks out was there's a scene in there. There was a very emotional scene for me that hit very close to home. And I remember showing up on that day of filming, and I didn't know how it was going to go. Just as an actor, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen when we get into that set and I'm in that position. I don't know emotionally what's going to go on. And it was really wonderful, and all the credit to Tobin, because he was just in it with me. Like, and that's so great for a guy who's had a 50+ year career to, like, even when the camera's not on him, like, he was just fully there as a performer, as a person, and I consider him a friend at this point, to help me through that scene so that we could get the best performance, but also a real performance.
That's cool. I love when you have opportunities like that and you're being able to walk away with something that kind of marks you, as you move forward. Mm-hmm. You have gone from, South Carolina to Atlanta to LA, lots of different ways of life. And I'm sure walking through this, you've seen lots of different things to where your faith could have been swayed. How have you been able to live, even working in the industry that you do, and keep your faith grounded?
I think it comes down to, and I think this helps me in telling stories, is to be open-minded to other people and their perspectives, and to really try to understand their perspectives. I think it's really easy to kind of say, oh, my way is the right way. But like, the older I get, the more I realize, like, this world is it's not black and white. It's super complicated, and I feel like it gets more complicated every year. And that there's a lot of pain in this world, and to try to listen and understand the perspective of someone's pain. And I think that to me is the single most important thing that my faith brings to my life, is like, at the end of the day, above anything else, I'm just supposed to love people. And so if I remember that, it doesn't matter like what they believe, politics, pandemics, like whatever. It's like, at the end of the day, I'm just supposed to love them, and all the judgment, someone else is going to take care of that. Someone way more smarter and wise and godlier than I am, which is God. But yeah, I mean, that's how I try to walk through daily life, is I just try to love. And when I forget that, it's usually when I am not a great person.
Yeah, I mean, that's, and when you're sitting there talking, I was just thinking, like, you just got to love people. And then you said it, because that's where your faith shines the most, is when you can love people no matter where they're at in life, what their beliefs are, whatever they think, is the right way, the wrong way. If they know that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, and you don't agree on everything, but you can love them right where they're at, I think that speaks volumes for your faith. And that's when it opens the door to, maybe I want to know the God that He knows, So I love that. We've got about, 3 minutes or so. I wanted you to take some time, just in your experience of life, to encourage our viewers. Like, what would be something, if you saw someone today, what would be the words that you would tell them? We're living in a time that is unsure, that feels rocky, and when you have your faith in man, it can feel helpless. But when we can look to our Father and know that He has things under control, it's encouraging to me when I'm in the Word. What would you just say to someone today who's feeling a little bit helpless about just what's going on in our world today, and how would you encourage them?
I mean, I think I was having a conversation with someone a couple of days ago, and it was kind of a repetitive conversation. We've had this conversation multiple times in the past year, and usually it ends kind of frustrating. But this time was a different tone. And I mentioned that I was like, hey, I feel like that we're kind of ending this conversation in a much better place than in the past. And he mentioned the serenity prayer. It's God, let's see, what is it? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that's really important because a lot of the stress that we have on a day-to-day basis, how much can we actually control, right? And the things that we have no control over, we can't harp on it. We got to let it go. And so the pandemic, we're talking about masks and all that stuff. And it's like, I'm in Los Angeles, so like we're all over the mask. Like we have to wear masks indoors everywhere. And, is it frustrating? Would I rather not wear a mask? Of course. But at the end of the day, I have much tougher things in my life to deal with than a piece of cloth on my face. And there's people in this world who, I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, who were trying to hang on to planes to essentially save their life. Mm-hmm. And so it's like offering a little bit of perspective and just trying to say, hey, you know what? Here's a list of things that I can't control, and I have to, move on from these. And here's a list of things I can control, and I have to focus on that. And I think that's a game changer when you start embracing that kind of mindset. But it's hard. But usually, I mean, what do y'all think when you find yourself getting kind of like angry or short-tempered? What is it about? About something you can't change.
Right. So good. Thank you so much for just taking the time to be with us today, sharing your heart, sharing your film with us and the story behind it. So if you guys have not seen the movie A Father's Legacy, you need to get it and watch it, starring Jason Mack. He's the writer, the director. You won't be disappointed. Mom, you want to pray over our viewers tonight?
Father, we thank you for the privilege of prayer tonight, and we just speak over all these people that have called in tonight with a prayer request, suffering from something, have a friend that's suffering with something. We just reach out to them right now, and we just say that you're healed, and we just pray that total wholeness come to your life. And we thank you, Lord, for this station that reaches out to so many. And we just pray, God, that you would protect us throughout this week and go with us in Jesus' name. Thank you for joining us tonight.